Eric Macias. I am a program manager with the Latin American Youth Center and Maryland Multicultural Youth Centers. And I've worked for that organization for about 5 years, working with out-of-school youth, disconnected youth from 16 to 24 years old in different types of programming, from education to mentoring, workforce, etc., wraparound services in general. And we're here in Montgomery County, but our main site is in DC.
Good morning, my name is Lisette Engel. I am from Montgomery County, born and bred, but my day job, I am a program manager for a nonprofit called Community Tax Aid. I manage 15 sites for the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, and my other persona is I volunteer extensively with programs that help low-income families, parents with disabilities, and single mothers.
Good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Cartagena. I work with the Housing Opportunities Commission of Montgomery County. I am the coordinator for our Fatherhood Initiative program, where we work with fathers, bridging the gaps of absent fathers in our single mother households. And I've been doing this work for about 10 years. And yeah, that's what we do.
Good morning. My name is Edward Powell. I've been working with Responsible Fathers Program of Montgomery County Child Welfare Services. We do an abundant amount of different things, and when I say we, there's really no we, it's just a me. But however, we do workshops, we do classes, we also do one-on-one coaching with fathers and their families. We cover the whole aspect of fatherhood, and then also bringing the family together. And so that's what we really focus on. So, thank you.
I guess we're going to be talking about multi-generational households. And I mean, you want to start off, Eric?
Sure. Just so for like a brief, introduction, multi-generational households are those that have different generations, grandparents or parents, and children that may have kids as well, that live under one roof, kind of, that's the technical definition. These guys might have better statistics than I do, but from my understanding, it's about 5 million people that kind of are in that kind of situation. And what I want to talk about is what I've seen in LAYC from young parents, kind of working with them, and what they have faced and some of those challenges. We work with a lot of families that are reunified because the parents might have migrated to the United States earlier and left their children behind. So some of the things that we see is kind of role changing, and parents often not feeling like the parents because they have left kids behind. So when they come, they're like, yo, you're not my dad. Don't talk to me like that. You haven't seen me in 10 years. I took care of my brother or sister. Don't act like you're the parent. So like role reversals kind of become a challenge and create a lot of tension in the family. And because of that, there's a lot of power struggles in the relationship. Another challenge that I have seen while working with young parents is the American parent versus home country parent, it creates a little bit of another tension in the family, because they might see young children, or young parents might see their peers as like, oh, I want to do things different. I see how my friend's family does their parenting, and I want it to be a little bit different than my parents do, which is a little bit more traditional, more focused on stereotypical patriarchal roles. So that becomes a little bit of a challenge, and the expectations within those families are a little bit different because of the difference in culture, in economic and social situations. And all of this creates a little bit of, or a lot of tension within the families, and all of the families that live under the same roof, because they have different ideas, different notions of what parenting should look like. So to be a little bit solution oriented, because I'm just like rushing through this. Yeah. So giving up power, because all of the power struggles become it's kind of like the base of it, giving up power, and that is such a hard thing to do, but it's an important thing to kind of release a little bit of the tension and being in constant communication, important, clear communication with the parents, so that they understand the differences. There's always going to be differences, and it's sometimes like people don't want to talk about the differences, but the differences are actually what's going to cave in, realizing what the differences are and acknowledging them, so that then we can create, or young parents and grandparents can create clear expectations. So this is what I want to do, this is your role, this is my role, and so on, and creating those expectations creates better and healthier relationships that kind of doesn't weigh in as much on the relationship of the family as a whole. And again, expectations that are valid and that are measurable and that are attainable. It can't be something extreme, because those extreme expectations also creates more tension instead of easing it. So by that I mean, you can't just say, no, grandma, you cannot see my child for the rest of your life. Is that really the expectation that you want? That is an extreme expectation. That creates more tension than actually bringing some clarity to the middle. And at LAYC, at MMYC in Silver Spring, what we have is 3 kind of programs that work with young parents. One is the mentoring Full Circle Brotherhood, which is young men, disconnected young men working as mentors, as peer mentors to middle school children, and talking about masculinity, fatherhood, and what it means to be a dad, what it means to be a man, so that young children in the community can start appreciating role models that have had challenging experiences, but are also able to become role models. Another program is the Promotora Pathway, which is an intensive case management and mentoring. So the case managers stay with the young people.
Sorry, what pathway?
Promotor. The Promotora Pathway is an intensive case management that stay with the young people for a long period of time. So if one of the young people enters the pathway at age 15, they stay with them until they age out at age 25. So they stay with them, and a lot of them become parents, but they have a healthy role model that they can look up to for feedback, for help, for guidance, and to navigate systems as well. And then one of the programs that we recently started is Parents as Leaders. So we're going into the community and talking to elementary school parents, high school parents, middle school parents, through a series of 6 workshops on self-esteem, learning about educational system, being integrated into educational system, being part of PTAs, so that the parents can be knowledgeable and involved in their kids' education, so that when the kids are growing, they have a healthier and knowledgeable understanding of education, and their parents as well. So I'll kind of leave it at that, because I think that was like exactly 5 minutes. So I'm gonna push that on to Lisette.
So I'm here to talk about pretty much on the parent side of things. Is everybody here in a situation where they're living with other generations in their household? Yes? Okay, so I became a parent at 15, which meant that I was gonna be living with my mom and the kids, and it just created this whole dynamic that I wasn't ready for, that my mother wasn't ready for, that my kids just naturally kind of had to, deal with. I had both my kids in high school, I was 15 and 17, and I lived with my mother up until I was 21. And first of all, I hadn't really had a relationship with my mom because I, like many Latino parents, I was born here and then got sent back to our home country because, finances and whatnot. So when I came back, I was getting to know this stranger. So while we were trying to figure things out with our own relationship, I became pregnant and I had these 2 kids, but I was also in the process of being more Americanized and trying to assimilate to that culture. So there were just so many intersection and issues and complexity to the relationship that we just did not get along in any way, shape, or form. When I was preparing for this workshop, my daughter is now 15, So I have a much better sense of communication and what she needs, which is what I would have wanted when I was her age. So one of the things that I said is I'm going to go and talk to parents and hopefully provide some insight and suggestions and solutions to the situation. And, I want to get your feedback. What did you think when we were leaving with Abuela? Because obviously I had a really hard time, but you're not messed up, so I want to know what we did right. And she said that I was able to acknowledge and recognize all the things that didn't work. And one of those things was the lack of communication. My mom, for whatever reason, with her parent or her parent before her, just didn't understand the importance of talking to your child like a person. You're talking down to them, and it's my way or the highway. And that is cultural, but it's also that power play, because I had gone out into the world trying to find myself, and she had lost control, I would say, over me. So by talking to me that way, I think it was her way of having some control over who I was under her roof. That I felt was creating a very bad relationship or image for my daughter, because when she was younger, and she doesn't remember this, she was seeing me more as her sister than as her parent. And I was so lucky to be involved with many resources in different programs here in the county, which are parenting and in school and just other things that were teaching me that the relationship that we were building wasn't the relationship that we needed to have. When my son came along, I was in even more of a hurry to try to change the dynamics in the relationship with my mother, because he was diagnosed with a genetic condition, which meant that he had lots of medical issues and there was going to be some cognitive delays there. So I needed to make sure that in any way he understood that I was the mom, and that when we went out to doctor's appointments or other community resources, that people acknowledged me as a parent and not as just somebody that was just there, which I think tends to happen a lot. I think our parents, by no fault of their own, are still our parents and want to protect us and want to, take the initiative or take the lead. And I felt many times that I wasn't being acknowledged, or that I wasn't being taken into consideration, and that my voice wasn't valued. So it took a lot of courage until to kind of take that step. And the way that I felt was the best way to solve things was by moving out of my house. It was really, really hard for my mom, but it was a lot harder for my kids. And that's when I realized, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that I did this now when they're younger, because had we stayed together, it would have created an even bigger issue. With the blurring boundaries of who was the parent, who was in charge. Because a lot of times my mom still talked to me like I was a kid, and that was really, really hard to, just bring up. And there was that fine line of being disrespectful or not. So the way that I solved it was by connecting with all the community resources available to me, talking to teachers, and even seeking out therapy, and understanding that therapy isn't a bad thing, that we needed that I needed that to learn how to stand up for myself, learn how to stand up for the kids, and then in turn bringing them in once I was in a place where I was healthy and we could do it. And so fast forward 10 years later, we've got a really good relationship with my mom. She understands why I needed to do what I did. It was not easy. There was a lot of screaming and a lot of times when we weren't talking. But when I see my kids now, I know that we made the right choice.
Oh, you timed it. Wow. That's awesome. I don't know how to match you guys, your presentation, but similar to, growing up in a Spanish household, same thing. I'm a Latino. My mom and father came from Central America. They came in when they were young, but I was raised with grandma, so I saw those roles, kind of blurry, kind of like I figured that was my mom. But just to give you a little bit background about the multi-generational households, it's a leading increase right now. It's about 4.2% increase in multi-generational households. And what that means is there's folks that are living with up to 5 generations, so great-grandparents right now. And the increase or the major factors that are happening now is, one, slower starts. I know a lot of folks in their 20-somethings, we're saying 20-somethings, are staying home. They're not getting married. They want to stay home, and there's nothing wrong with that, but they're staying home, and sometimes they may have children, and they're raising their children with mom and dad and them, and grandparents. Immigration, as you heard Lisette say, that's another reason why there's a lot of households, multi-generational households, and that's because culturally, that's what folks know. They bring the cultures from other countries, and they establish them here. Sometimes it could be plus. I say in the form of childcare is a plus because you got grandma or grandpa. But like Lisette was saying, sometimes it could be there could be a negative to it with regards to relationships and boundaries, and the lines in raising children. The availability of kin. That's another factor. And what that is that a lot of the baby boomers, they are now able to host their parents. And a lot of them do that because they're able to economically. And economically is the main one. So they're able to bring mom and dad and let them live with them. So that usually is in the form of a baby boomer and then their parents, grandparents, and they're also raising their own children. Another major factor why there's multiple multi-generational households would be health issues, health and disability issues. We know that folks don't always have the best of health, and a lot of elderly folks, elderly parents, are moving back in, either to move back in with their children, adult children, or to be back in the household with adult children and a home health aide of some form. So that's one factor. And then the most common one is economic conditions, and that is because you could save more and you also bring in a larger income. Those are main factors of multi-generational households that we see now that are trending. And actually, to give you a number, it was 46.5 billion in 2007, and then it rose by 2009 to 10%, so it rose to 51.4 million folks, now in the 2000s. So we've seen an increase, and there's a trend in multi-generational households, especially with the cost of living going up. So we're seeing that now. Like Lisette said, you heard the different experiences. Some, they're good. Some you have challenges, but for the most part, it's there and it's increasing now as we see it going on. And I just want to say, I'm gonna cut it short because I don't want to get into your time. But we have the different types of generational households. You have the most common, which is a 3-generation household, and that's mom, child, and grandparents. Then you have grandfamilies, which are grandparents raising grandchildren. So those are older, and we're starting to see a lot of that. And I know I'm coming from a family program, fatherhood initiative program, where we have grandparents raising their children, their children's children. So we're seeing a lot of that. And then a couple of the other one is two adult generation households, which you have that consists of parents and then children who are older in their 18 to 22 years of age. And they also have grown children, but this is called a boomerang era, or a boomerang person, where they are older, they leave the house, but because of financial burden or unemployed or underemployed, they come back home. So you're seeing a lot of that here now. And now what I was telling you in the beginning, we're seeing 4 to 5 generations, where that's mom, dad, grandparents, children, and then great-grandparents. So we're seeing a lot of that. It was fairly uncommon back then, but now we're seeing it's coming back into our society, and it's being seen, commonly seen. Just giving you a little bit of that overview of the multi-generational knowledge, because I know everyone gave their experience, but I wanted to give you guys the stats in that. But I'm gonna pass it over to Ed Powell.
Thank you. Great job, Sharon. Good job, guys. So I'm Ed Powell. Again, I work for the Responsible Fathers Child Welfare Services. And so everybody's giving a little bit of their experience. So my experience is a little bit different, only probably because I'm a little bit older. So the difference is, my son has a son, and they stay with us part-time. Because my son is a professional athlete, then he gets his son when he's not working, basically. And so living that on a regular basis, and then because he's gone for such long periods of time, for 6 months, we get him, meaning my wife and I, get him in between that time to keep the relationship going. So we want to have that consistent family bond with our grandson, but also my son continues, and I hear people talk about getting those lines mixed up, and he does not get those lines mixed up, partly because when both of my grandson and my son name is Drew. So when the Drews are at home, Drew does everything for him. I mean, it's not like we have to ask him to. He literally does everything for him. So he doesn't call me, the younger Drew doesn't call me dad, he calls me pop. But he called his dad dad. So he understands the difference, and he hasn't blurred those lines. Well, the other thing is he called everybody mommy, but that's because he wants whatever he wants. He don't care what it is, he don't care who you are, he call you mommy. And I'm like, that's not the aunt mommy, grandma mommy, but that's his side of, I want something and I don't care who you are, you're the person gonna give it to me. So we were struggling about that for a little while, but then we realized that's his communication style. You know what I mean? That's how he communicates. What he wants immediately is mommy. You know what I mean? And it could be Jonathan. And he was like, mommy, mommy, mommy. And I'm like, that's not mommy. But then we realized, again, that's his communication style. But he doesn't get that. He doesn't do that with dad, but he definitely calls everybody mommy because he wants something. We know he's going to grow out of it. But that's kind of the blurred line that we thought we had, but we don't have. So I think everybody else touched on one particular subject that I got to stand up and do this so you guys don't mind me. So these numbers here indicate something. And the topic that we've been focusing on, really, that we all kind of we talked about was communication, right? And so that is so key and so important in a household with multi-generations, with more than just the mom and dad involvement. So communication is really key. So these are some numbers here. Does anybody have any idea what these numbers are when we're talking about communication? A panel, anybody? Y'all can't see my cheat sheet, can you? Okay, no, good. Yeah. So anybody, just any numbers. So talk about communication. Any panel, anybody, somebody.
Would it be the communication between the generations?
Oh, that.
From one generation to the next?
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Yeah, but that's not exactly, but I like the way you think. That's really good. No, not exactly. Anybody else? Okay, so here we go. So all communication, video, talking is only 7% verbal. Only 7% of what people are saying out of their mouths that we're actually listening to, right? That's the only thing that we're taking in. So all the words that I'm taking, all the words that we're all saying, everybody only takes 7% of those words. So what's the 38%? Just take an educated guess. So 7%. So I won't leave because we ain't got a lot of time, so I'm not gonna leave you. Okay, so this percent right here is what we would call the basically tone of what someone says. How I say something makes a lot of difference about how it's delivered, right? So 55%. Anybody? Take an educated guess?
Visual?
Kinda.
Body language?
Yeah, bingo. Yeah, exactly. So it's body language. So I can stand here and tell you guys that you're the best class that I've ever had, but if I got a frown on my face and I got my arms folded and I got my, and I got my back turned and I tell you the class, y'all may not believe it, but if I got a big old smile on my face, I got my hands open, you might just believe y'all might be the best class I ever had. How my pitch, tone, and body language told you that it's not my words, but you're looking at my actions. So what does this mean? 93% of all communication is nonverbal. That's what this means. 93% of all communication is nonverbal, right? Because it's made up of these things, right? So that's why 93% is nonverbal. So I did my math, so this is the right answer. So if you total these three out, it's gonna come out to this, right? Just because in families, we kind of use a lot of nonverbal language, right? So, so we have to practice using that, yes.
It's the first one, the verbal plus the nonverbal that make 100%. So it's the middle two.
Yes, the middle two, yes, it's the middle two. Good, thank you. Yeah, because you take these two and then add this one, you get 100%, makes it nonverbal. Right, yes. So what we're saying is that communication is really key in all relationships, but especially in multi-generational families where you have people literally speaking, sometimes literally and figuratively speaking different languages. And what I mean by different languages, because the way I grew up is different than the way my son grew up. You know what I mean? So my experiences that I want to talk about and gesture to may not be his experience that he want to give to his son. So we got to be careful and have that conversation, right? And so you got to know your family members. You got to know how they respond. So just example, so my son, Drew, the son, literally I have to be careful in what I say to him about his son, Drew. Like if I give him a suggestion, he will literally do exactly what I told him to do. And then I'm like, no, I didn't mean you to do that exactly. I wanted you, so I have to be careful in how I direct him with his son. You know what I mean? So you got to understand those things. That's all about communication. So now I realize that. So I give him open-ended. I give him, hey, you got this option or this option. You know what I mean? So, but you really have to understand that communication is extremely important in the makeup of multi-generational families. Right? Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Is there any questions? I guess we got a couple minutes. So if there's any questions, anybody want to?
I have a question.
Okay.
I don't know how relevant it is to what we're discussing, but I have a young son. He's 2 years old, and I'm 23, and his father is like 50. So there's a huge difference as far as generation because we're no longer together. But as far as me raising a son, and his dad, he grew up in a different time than I did. Mm-hmm. And when we were together, really, I was old enough to be his child. Mm-hmm. So to raise a son, a young man at a age that I'm at, and I never really had any good male role models in my life to be an example to him. Mm-hmm. And I'm not knocking his father down because he loves his son, but there's certain things that I want to implement when raising my son mm-hmm. that I don't know if his dad could really do in those areas. So I don't know, with that generation that we have, it's so far out, how I can, set a good example or communicate with his father and, have a good man to raise a young man. It's so, far out, but I think it's important to discuss.
Right, yeah. Eric or Cassette, you guys?
I think the fact that you acknowledge that mm-hmm. is a really good start mm-hmm. because you could really just turn a blind eye to it and not recognize that there's an issue that needs to be discussed. So your son's 2 right now, right?
Mm-hmm. And actually his father, his household is similar to what you were saying about the men going back. He's got like 10 kids, yeah. But all of the older children that he has, all his young, older sons, they all live with him now. So it's many generations that are under his roof that my young son is being influenced by. Mm-hmm. So it's a big thing.
Do you have an actual...
Their kids are there as well.
Do you have an actual relationship with him as far as being able to discuss openly decisions for your son?
Yeah, but sometimes it's difficult because sometimes I feel like he talks to me as if I'm a child.
Yeah.
And we were at one time together, but I'm not your child. I'm
You're the co-parent, exactly.
So we have to have that boundary, but sometimes he's like, oh, she's so childish, but you have to understand, this is my first child. He has, 10 plus kids, he's older, this isn't his first rodeo, but we have to be able to, again, have that communication and not have the generation thing. We have to be able to discuss and have an open line of communication and said, look, this is where we're at, and we have to figure out a solution, understanding the difference, like you said. And
one of the things that I tried with my mom, and I know this is, the father, but one thing that I wanted to try with my mom was getting a neutral party to come in and kind of just not dictate or anything, but just be present into the conversation that we were having so that I could hear things that I was, because I thought I was saying everything right, but, sometimes we don't.
Right.
And to have that, my mom wasn't very open to it, which made it a little hard, but that's just something out there. If you can find someone that both of you know, or even someone else that can be the middle person
Right.
to
That's
kind
not
of
right.
just facilitate that conversation and say that you're not willing to attack the other's parenting styles, but that you just want to do what's best for the child. Or if anybody has other things.
I agree with Lisette. So in regards to finding that third party, she said someone that you guys both know. I would recommend mediation, someone that you guys don't know. Because even if you know someone, there's some form of biases there. I mean, whether on your part or on his part, you just want someone who's coming in here with a clear conscience, clear mind, doesn't know you from Adam or your partner or your kid, and just are just faced with the facts of what you guys are trying to present to each other. But like Lisette said, and I know Ed mentioned too, like clear communication, it's key. I'm co-parenting too with the mother of my kids, and I've noticed that the better our communication is, the smoother the relationship is running. I know it's easier said than done. It's a working process. It just doesn't happen overnight. So I don't know, how long you've been separated from the child's father, but it's a working process. So take that into consideration. But mediation, I strongly advise from someone that's neutral, that you don't know, that none of you guys know.
There is the Conflict Resolution Center in Montgomery County, which is a good place to start if that's a route that you want to explore.
I'll have something. I think it's one, thank you for sharing your experience. And I agree with what Liz said. And I'm sorry, Jonathan, right? Yeah, I got it right. And what Jonathan was saying, the first part that Lisette mentioned that is huge is the acknowledgement of it, and it just takes a lot of work on meeting that expectation and actually molding what your expectation is. And in terms of like role models and mentoring, there are resources out in the community. There are Boys and Girls Club, that there are sisters, big sisters, big brothers programs that they can provide that model or that role model experience for your children, for your child, that if it's lacking in one of the parental sides, right? And negotiating that piece is super important with the other parent, but having an agreement, whether it is sometimes difficult to manage, but getting it there, right? And like I said, molding that expectation to what you both need, not acknowledging that there is the generational difference is important, and what the parent might see, what the other parent might see as like, no, this is important to me. How do you combine that with what you need and what your children or your child needs, so that everyone comes to an agreement on something?
And I think it's important because sometimes it is a really, crazy situation between the father of my son that we had, but I want to be different compared to other people who always want to rip fathers apart and think that they have a bad rap, because that is one thing. He is there, although he has ton of children, he is provided for all of them. He deals with his own struggles, but as far as actually being there for him, he is there. But there are things that concern me that I think that we can do to work together to truly raise a strong young man. And now that we have an opportunity with our son now, whatever he wasn't able to do with his other children, we can do with him, so that he doesn't have to experience maybe coming back home like the other children did. So
I just want to piggyback on what you said. That was powerful what you said. Fathers, single fathers now get bad reps, or fathers in general get bad reps, and guess this is where I'm going to do a commercial for our program. But no, that's true. You know, he has this opportunity to, I don't want to say redeem himself, but to hone in on those parenting skills with the child that you have now. And I think what it is you have to find that common ground. What is it that brought you guys together in the first place to, you know, have a child? And there is something that brought you together, and kind of build on that. I'm not saying get back with him, but build on what brought you guys together and the morals that you guys both have. But you said it right. You know, you're trying to be a team player. And that's what co-parenting is, regardless if you're a mother or father, is being that team player, which you are doing the right steps. And I guess, you know, not to take any more other time, we can give you some resources after this. I know Ed Powell has a couple programs, we run programs, you guys have your own programs as well. So we could definitely give you resources after that, mediation resources and some other stuff as well. Any other questions? Comments, anything?
Well, I have
Candy?
a question. I have a question. My children at times do spend times with my parents. We don't live in the same household, but there are some things about my parents that I don't agree. And so just really trying to find a boundary of not wanting to be disrespectful in how I communicate to my children about things that I don't agree about my parents. Because, you know, it's kind of a fine line. I mean, they love their grandparents, but it's just their old school way of thinking. In today's culture, as we're moving forward and we're progressing, there are some ways and behaviors that I don't agree with. And so I don't correct, not saying that I would correct my parents, but I have to go back and sometimes undo things that they have said.
Well, that's the really important part of what has to happen when we're talking about communications. I've been on that side also, because I have older children and I have grandchildren, and when my children used to go with my parents and with my in-laws, some of the things that my dad, I'm just gonna throw it on my dad, some of the things that my dad said, and I would cringe, literally cringe. But believe it or not, they didn't take to his sayings. They went to my and my wife ideologies, ideas, you know, and so the experiences they had at home, outside of their home, other than kind of what Grandpa was saying, I'm like, you can't say that, Dad. You know what I mean? I mean, you know, I can. You know, I'm like, you can't. You know, so he had this funny saying that because my dad literally, I'm just gonna throw him out there. My dad cussed like a sailor, literally every other curse word. So I said to him, you know, no, I believe one of his grandchildren said, well, why do you curse so much? Well, in his explanation, he used a curse word. So, you know, so I was like, you know, but we don't use that kind of language. So my kids don't tend to use that kind of language. And I'm talking, you know, they're 28 and 23 and 22. They don't use that language. And they spent every summer going back and forth to the grandparents' house, you know. So some of those experiences, my sons didn't want to go to, and funny because they didn't want to eat all the stuff that grandma was cooking. Not that it wasn't good, they wanted to play sports, and they would come back overweight, and they wouldn't make the weight. So they would cry. I'm like, why you crying? Grandma, make us eat. You know what I mean? So those are the things we had to understand. Like, Mom, you can't have them, you know, because old school, you stay there until it was all done. You know what I mean? So I had to have a conversation with my parents to say, if they say they're full, you know, don't make them, you know. I had to do that with my mom because, you know, that's old school. And she did it. I was like, I said, Mom, you can't, you know, I said, they're not like us. You know what I mean? I said, so, you know, when they're full, when they say they're full, you know, can you let them leave the table, please? You know, and so she was like, okay, I understand. You know, so the conversation has to be had. You know what I mean? Whether they agree or disagree, you have to have a conversation. And that's what I say. I mean, that's what I'm saying.
It's hard when, I think it's hard when you're a son than when you're a daughter to have a conversation with your parents. Because I know that my brother can go up to my mom and say whatever he wants to, about whatever he doesn't disagree with. But I have to be on, like a little bit on the fence because I'm afraid of being disrespectful. I'm afraid of how it might come out. How old are your kids?
My oldest is 22 and my youngest is 13.
13.
Yeah.
So with the 13-year-old, that's a little hard.
Yeah, just over the years, like for instance, we go out for dinner and to celebrate my mom's birthday. And so their belief is that you don't get good service, you don't tip. And I don't believe in that.
Right.
Yeah. I believe in tipping even if you don't get good service.
Right.
And so I had to get in the car with them when, grandma wasn't around and say, no, that is not how you do it.
Yeah.
So it's just certain beliefs and behaviors that they exhibit that I have to like, no, you can't do that. And so I've even somewhat pulled away a little bit of going over there a little bit because it's just,
So the key, I think, from my experience, just with my 15-year-old and 13-year-old, is my mom just, oh my gosh, like I came back with tattoos and my mom stopped talking to me. When my daughter was 7, she stopped talking to me because grandma believes that people with tattoos are just bad people, and she was channeling that with my daughter. And back then it was just really hard to kind of make that difference. But now with my mom and her beliefs, what I say to the kids is everybody's entitled to their own way of thinking. But you and I want to make sure that you share into what I believe in and what you do until you're 18 or whatever. Right. Then you want to believe what grandma believes, that's fine with me. But for now, this is what I'm encouraging and this is what I preach. So I try to make that distinction that we have to be respectful of others' thinkings. And I exhibit that by, as much as I hate it, trying to be, respectful to how my mom says things or does things. And I say, well, I simply don't believe in that and I won't buy into that kind of thing, and that's how I found a balance into that relationship.
It is very challenging because, for instance, my youngest daughter plays travel softball, and my parents can sometimes go over the line when we go to games, and I had to call them. My daughter was in a tournament last month, and I had to call them to tell them ahead of time, hey, we're going to a tournament, and you can't be disrespectful in making these comments, because we can get put out the game. Yeah. And it's like, they're in their 60s and 70s.
So I think somewhat you mentioned something great, that is that having those conversations. And I think like the base of, and it's something that Lisa was hinting at, is people have different truths. My truth is different than your truth and your truth. So grandparents have a different truth, and understanding that it's important to initiate a conversation. And I think that the conversation that you're having with your children could be also had once the grandparents are in a better place to have the conversation. The conversation should also be had with them so that they can understand the difference, right? Like, yes, people tip. Why? There might be a little bit more behind that, and maybe if your children are able to influence that conversation with the grandparents, it could play a role in how grandparents then talk about different things around them, because they could be, one, checked, or two, informed by the grandchildren themselves, and that's an empowerment tool to the grandchildren as well. So that's something I have that all the time with my mom, because I'm like the outcast of the family when it comes to like politics and all this stuff. I don't shy down from having those conversations because I believe they're important to be had and to negotiate.
I'll say one thing.
Yeah, I'm just like.
You okay?
You
Okay. You want to say something?
Yeah.
Go for it.
What? Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm trying to get some extra water.
No, it's okay.
Congratulations.
Yes. Good things.
Okay, it's kind of hot, but
Go for it.
I live in the house with my mom, my stepdad. I'm the oldest out of 6, so we all live in the house. And then I have my twin daughters. And then, like I said, my mom's a single mom. And I had to raise 2 of my siblings. So my childhood was basically like taken away from me. So when I turned like 18, I always I basically was terrible. Like went out the house, leave, not come home, do everything, And my mom would get so mad at me, and I'm like, I would blame her, like you took my childhood from me. Like I had to sit there watching them, and I can't do anything. You get mad, I can't do anything. I gotta watch them all the time. And so now, I ran out the house, didn't come home. So now my sister, she runs out the house. She doesn't come home. She has a bad boyfriend. Her and my mom was getting into it. My brother gets in trouble all the time, leaves the house, doesn't come home. He's locked up right now, So it's now we're all trying to get into a place where we're happy, we can talk, but we have no communication at all. It's nothing. And it's I have so much anger. Me and my sister get into it all the time. Me and my brother get into it all the time. So it's so stressful. And then I have twin daughters. I don't want them raised in a house like that. I have no communication. So with my boyfriend, I don't know how to communicate. And I argue with him all the time. So it's everything is just.
A lot.
Yeah.
Are you connected with any parenting or family support programs? Because I think that would be a really good start, because at this point, in my opinion, it would be good to take care of you, and because you have a vision of what you want already and you've identified that. So if you need to get to a point where you can pursue that, because trying to take care of everybody else, as much as it hurts right now, is gonna just deviate or distract you from where you want to go, because you already know what you want. So it's just trying to get you there. There's a few programs here. I know that the Child Link table will be a great resource for you to get started, to get you and your daughters into a program that can provide parenting classes, and that will embed and encompass a lot of other things that would be really good for you. And I mean, thank you so much for sharing. And I know that this will be a stepping stone for you to get where you need to be for your daughter and for your daughters and for the baby that's coming.
Yeah, I agree with Lisette. You have to take, it sounds selfish, but you're entitled to be selfish right now. You're raising two daughters, you raise your sisters, and you have one on the way. But to take advantage of some of the resources we have, and like I said, after this, we can link you up with some of the stuff that we know. But thank you for sharing, and you really have to, just how you shared, and you took that step to sharing, you have to take that step too, to find resources for yourself and to actually make it happen. Because, like I said, it's okay to be selfish, and sometimes folks, especially in your house, it sounds like a full household right now, and everyone's looking, and everyone is fending for themselves, really, in reality.
I don't show my feelings.
You hold them in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
you can only hold
I'll
them in
show
so
them.
long.
I won't care if I'm arguing with my sister. I won't show.
Exactly.
Nothing.
Yeah.
It's just.
Yeah. And self-care. You have to take care of yourself, because if you can't take care of yourself, you can't be expected to take care of anyone else. So like we said, after this, I'm going to give you some cards, and I'll show you who else to talk to. I'm sure we also have some resources for you, but thank you so much for sharing with us.
And another thing I would want to say is think about breaking those generational
Absolutely.
verses. Definitely, because you now have children that are seeing that same behavior, and it's just going to be repetitive.
And that's what I don't want.
Yeah. Well, it's time.
And I think there's,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. What I was saying was that I think you mentioned that you hide your feelings, and I think showing your feelings is okay, right? I think that there's an ability to, it's so hard, right? But I think there's an ability to be okay with being angry, right? Anger is a feeling, and it's okay to be angry. It's what we do with those feelings, right? If I am angry and then I'm punching at Lisette, then that's not a good thing, right? But we don't want to do that. But if I'm angry, I am able to talk about my anger, and then I am able to negotiate the next step in that anger, or how to deal with those feelings, how to cope with those feelings a little bit better, so that then you become, like she was saying, you become a role model for people around you on how to manage and how to cope with feelings, whether they're positive feelings or maybe a little bit feelings that may create a little bit more tension and more barriers.
And also, just on a basic level too, it gets, sharing your feelings, what you're doing now, it lets the other person know, oh, there's something wrong here. So where you holding it in, people probably in your household thinking, oh, you're fine. What's your name? Naima's fine. She's okay. She can take care of the kids, but they don't know this side of you. I'm sure, you don't break down to them, so they don't know what's going on. Just on a basic level like that. And sharing your feelings with the folks that are in your house is as basic as it gets, and they could probably be, I don't know what's going on, the details of it.
Even more like the fact that my sister and brother went out the house, I feel like
you were causing
they see me do it, so they want to go do it.
I wouldn't blame yourself.
And then they come and they blame my mom for everything.
I wouldn't blame yourself for it.
And I get so mad at them. It's like, don't be disrespectful to my mother, because I learned it was like that wasn't right for me to do. So don't follow me and do it. Don't blame mommy for everything, because it's not her fault. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So that's just
well, it's mature abuse.
Yeah, and I think what all of us are saying here is the most important part is taking advantage of those resources of everything that's offered will help you get in a place that things start to change, and you can see change if you take a parenting class. So what a parenting class will do will not only have you be an understanding of your parenting ways, but understand how you were parented, and then how you can say, okay, well, I want to bring that into my parent, or you know what, that didn't work out for us, so I want to leave that behind and add something to it. So one of my saying is, if you are a carpenter and you have one tool, and that one tool is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. So what those resources will do will continue to add more resources, and will continue to add more tools to your toolbox, so you don't look at every situation the exact same way. You know what I mean? And so that's what starts to change that generational thing that goes on. When you want to have different experiences, you want to put your children around different people. And so all of those things are really, I think what we're all saying is that the experiences, and I think what everybody's saying is that the resources that you take advantage of will be a major outcome. You'll have a major outcome. All right. So y'all, I think we don't want to miss lunch. So let's break. I want to thank you guys. Thank you very much. A really open and candid conversation was really good. And thank you, panelists. Thank you guys.